exchange, you on TV last week on Channel 4 News, about this point about a meeting at the House of Commons where you introduced speakers from Hamas and Hezbollah as friends and said you'd be honoured to host them in Parliament. Do you want to just address that right away?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. No, genuinely, I'm very happy with it because it means we can have a serious discussion, and it is a very serious issue. In the programme last week, I was irritated with the way in which Krishna Gurumurthy brought it up. He quoted half a sentence of something that was said at a meeting some years ago in Parliament. He did not afford me initially the opportunity to explain the circumstances or the content of that meeting. Eventually he did, and we've done another interview this evening down the line, and we got along just fine, so we're friends again. So everything's okay.
Did it help not being in the same room?
Well, I don't know, it's proximity, isn't it? So that's better. I organised a meeting in Parliament in which Hezbollah were there, yes, as were many other people. It was a serious discussion about the situation facing the Middle East and how we go ahead with it, and what room there was for negotiations or talks that would involve some of the major forces in the region. And in introducing an opening meeting, I said, I welcome all our friends here, including our friends so on. I'm a kind of inclusive person that calls everybody friends. You're all friends, okay? And that was the context of it, and we had that discussion. I have also, on other occasions, I have met Hamas in the presence of Joe Kaufman and a number of other people. Indeed, Tony Blair has met people from Hamas on other occasions. There have been lots of discussions that have involved Hamas. Does it mean I agree with the social attitudes or social policies or legal views of those organisations? Absolutely not. And I've made that very clear to them as well. But does it mean that you've got to have talks with everybody in order to bring about some kind of long-term settlement? Yes. Israel did get involved in negotiations with Hamas, which brought about the ceasefire at the end of both Operation Cast Lead and Operation Protective Edge. They are claiming it's proximity talks in Cairo. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. The reality was there were talks involving all those parties. Surely we have to be prepared to talk to people. Can I say there are also people in Israel that are probably very unreasonable in many of their approaches. Does that mean they shouldn't be involved in the talks on the future of the whole region? Of course they've got to be involved in talks on the future of the whole region. You don't achieve progress by only talking to people you agree with. Look at what happened in Northern Ireland. Eventually the Republican movement and the Unionists came together, recognised they had a common heritage, and the rest, as they say, is history. The same is now happening in Colombia, the same happened in South Africa. You have to talk. At the end of it, every conflict is settled politically, not necessarily militarily.
Of course, there is an important truth here about sides having to negotiate, and having to negotiate sometimes with your enemies and with people that you disagree with in any peace process. And that was your question, I think, at the start. Of course that has to happen. It's what happens in Northern Ireland as well. But I don't think you can just kind of slide from saying, of course you can have negotiations, to therefore it's okay to have platforms with people or to invite people to speak at meetings or to call them friends. Jeremy and I get on very well. We've had good discussions. There's a lot of the hustings, but I think you, in these sorts of circumstances, have to be immensely careful about the language that you use. You cannot just describe people as friends who support terrorist activity. The final point is, I think therefore, the words that you use send signals to people that maybe what you might be doing is condoning things that they say. And what we know as well, for any peace process to be successful, we know that Hamas, Hezbollah have to renounce violence, have to accept the importance of the existence of the State of Israel. Those are crucial steps in any successful peace process, and therefore sending any signal that you might condone them disagreeing with that is really important not to do.
Okay. Firstly, would you have a meeting or host at Parliament representatives of Hamas and Hezbollah for the reasons perhaps Jeremy Corbyn has said? You've got to have dialogue with everyone. Would you do that yourself? And if you would or wouldn't, is there a case for clearer rules in the Labour Party about who MPs can invite and who they can't invite, so you don't get into this situation? What would you do as leader on that?
The first answer is no, I wouldn't. I don't think you can sit down as leader of the Labour Party with organisations that support terror. You cannot do that, and you shouldn't do that. Should there be clearer rules? Well, no MP in my Labour Party, in my PLP, would do that. I think there would have to be sanctions against somebody who did that.
So you would sanction Jeremy Corbyn if he hosted again the kind of meeting he's hosted in the past?
I think it's not something that can be done without consequences, in my view, to invite organisations of that kind into Parliament. I'm being honest. I like Jeremy, respect Jeremy, but I do not want the Labour Party that I lead to be associated with hosting or facilitating meetings of that kind without preconditions. I think that would be a wholly wrong thing to do. More broadly, language is important, as Yvette said. Language is extremely important. I visited Israel-Palestine in 2004 with Labour Friends of Israel. I visited Palestine and Israel in 2012 with Labour Friends of Palestine. What does that word relate to in that context, friends? In my view, in both cases, it relates to the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. That is who we are saying that we are giving our solidarity and support to in being associated with those organisations. It does not imply to me that we are therefore endorsing or condoning organisations within those countries. And I think you do need to be very, very clear about that. And so, just as I wouldn't associate myself with the less moderate parts of the Palestinian community, I would also say that I don't consider myself to be a friend of the current Israeli government, because I find some of the way that they are going about things, some of the language that has been used, particularly in the run-up to the recent general election, to be unsupportable. And I think that applies across the board in an even-handed way. In both cases, we should be clear about who we are friends with and who we are not friends with. That, I think, is where the Labour Party needs to be clearer going forward.
What was the
we
language?
shouldn't be loose in our language.
What was the language used by the current Israeli government that you found you could not support?
Well, there was talk about, I would have to go back to exactly what was said, but I'm sure about people swarming to the polls. Was there some kind of language of that kind in the run-up to polling day? It was provocative, it was derogatory, and I felt that was highly offensive in many ways.
You're referring to the Prime Minister.
We should say that, should we not? You know, if there is to be a sense of balance here, we should always have balance on both sides, and it seems to me to fall to people in my position, in our position, to show that at all times.
Sure. This came along this point about hosting or having meetings at Parliament with representatives of Hamas and Hezbollah. You've heard the case powerfully made here. You've got to talk to everyone. Did Tony Blair do that in Northern Ireland, over Sinn Féin, DUP? Would you have meetings with Hamas and Hezbollah in the House of Commons? And if you wouldn't, should there be some kind of rules in your Labour Party?
No, I wouldn't, and I think there's a huge difference between having the kind of discussions that anybody needs in a serious peace process and negotiation and an event in the House of Commons. That's just two very, very different things. And I'm very concerned about that, because as Hamas and Hezbollah and supporting terror, I would never do that as an MP. Jeremy has the right to do that, and I'm not sure that I, as leader of the Labour Party, would sanction that, but I would be very clear my own position and view is that those kinds of events and meetings shouldn't happen. We know how extraordinarily difficult it is going to be to get the peace process to move forward. There are serious concerns about the commitment to both the two-state solution and process on both sides. And we know that where successful negotiations have worked in the past has sometimes been with support of other countries and third parties. It's allowed some room for politicians to be able to move and bring their own side with them too. But there has to be a proper process here. I don't believe that comes through sort of events in the House of Commons, and whilst you have those negotiations, I wouldn't have used that word friends.
Thank you.